The ongoing horror in Gaza, the West Bank, the occupied territories of Palestine, Israel, is not the only horror in this world. As some of the viewers of these podcasts have said in contacting us, that what about Sudan? What about the Sahel? Why just Israel, Palestine? Well, the reason is quite simple. It's not just Israel, Palestine. We are perfectly aware of what is going on in Sudan. We are aware of what's going on in the Sahel and in the northern parts, even of Mozambique, and in other parts of the world as well. What is happening in India? What is happening in Europe in terms of the great move toward what is referred to as populism or the right, which is really just a form of, well, one would call it fascism. Of course, there's nothing terribly new in all of this. I mean, for example, we can go back a few centuries for when the popes passed bulls, which are decrees allowing Christians to conquer land, kill people, steal land, as long as they were not Christians. Anyone who was not a Christian was fair game. And that is what colonialism and settlement was all about, right around the world. Of course, those have now been withdrawn by the church. And the reason we have focused more on Israel-Palestine is because we have here the best example in the 21st century of ongoing apparent colonialism and settlement in exactly the same way, with ethnic cleansing, sometimes murder, often theft, not just of land, but of property as well. So that was the reason we have focused here, while being aware that there are problems elsewhere which are just as horrific, just as horrible, just as brutal, but the same divisiveness applies. We also have a situation where land stolen gets sold, as it was in the past, right around New Zealand, Australia, the United States, you name it. And that, again, is nothing new. The man who probably qualifies most of all as the archetypal Judeo-Nazi, to use a term coined by that great Israeli polymath, Professor Leibowitz, was Arthur Rupin, who was selling land stolen around the Dead Sea. It was his sideline. And it's again happening. In the United States, there have been sales being held of land stolen from Palestinians, and in Canada too, as this clip reveals.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Rabbi David Mivasser. I'm an active member of Independent Jewish Voices Canada. And I'm here today outside a synagogue where they're selling properties built on land stolen from Palestinians. There's a real estate agency that's come here today to Toronto to sell properties built on stolen Palestinian land. It's kind of unbelievable that Canada permits this. It's clearly illegal. So we're here today to call that out, and God willing to make it stop.
That is the reason, because the situation in that part of the Eastern Mediterranean reveals or highlights the problems, many of the problems of the use and abuse of religion, the idea of God is on our side, whether they're Christians, Muslims, Jews. This form of nationalism, this virus, which can mutate in the right conditions and has mutated certainly in that area and in others around Africa, in the Sahel, in Sudan, most definitely, in northern Mozambique, in India as well, mutates into what Leibowitz called Nazism. And it's just because this part, Israel-Palestine, highlights it all that we have concentrated on that at this stage. Settlement is the basic issue. And what we have now in occupied territories, occupied illegally, completely contrary to the so-called rule of law and ignored by the United States, which only now has decided not going to put boots on the ground. In other words, there'll be no soldiers stopping or fighting or ceasefire or anything, but is going to be depositing aid. This from the country and the president who provided hundreds of 2-ton high explosive bombs that were dropped on Gaza, creating the most terrible destruction and killing hundreds, thousands of men, women, and children. The hypocrisy, I'm afraid, to me, the hypocrisy is outstanding. And that's another reason why we have focused on this particular region. Now, what has happened because of this, there was a documentary made in 2015 about the settlers. It's been re-released, and I think justifiably so, because it shows some of the realities of what the settlement means, down to, for example, even the indoctrination of young children.
כשאני אומרת לכם ירושלים, מה עובר לכם בראש? מה זה ירושלים? בית המקדש.
כותל. מה עוד?
מי מאמין שבית המקדש ייבנה בשנים הקרובות? מה יש שם עכשיו על בית המקדש? אז מה יקרה עם המסגד? יישבר? אם מכם פגש בשנה האחרונה ילד ערבי?
איפה פגשת ילד ערבי? ליד הכותל.
דיברת איתו?
לא, הוא דחף אותי, אבל לא הלך.
ומה קורה כשאתם רואים ילד ערבי? מה אתם מרגישים?
פשוט זעם.
זעם? מה קורה כשאתם פוגשים ילד חילוני?
מרחם עליו שלא נולד חרדים.
למה אתה מרחם עליו שלא נולד חרדי? מה הוא מפסיד?
הוא לא הולך לדרך.
כשאתם חושבים על ירושלים בעוד 10 שנים, כולם חרדים?
לא כולם ערבים, חלק חרדים.
כולם יהודים, ויש גם ערבים שהם עבדים.
תהיה משיח, הבנתי, כן, מה אתה אומר?
שמלחמה כל הערבים ימותו, וחלק מהם יהיו עבדים.
קיבלת את כל הסיפור שלך. ילדים, תודה רבה. תודה רבה. תמשיכו להצליח ולראות אתכם בישיבות.
Indoctrination from the earliest age. I would actually argue that such indoctrination amounts to child abuse. But that is what is happening. And not only there, in other parts of the world as well, by these various supremacist groups, whether they be evangelical Christians or devout, or proclaimedly devout Hindus or Muslims or whatever. We are merely attempting to show the reality and to say we are part of one humanity in one world. And I must admit, when I look at some of the statements made by settlers, recent people who are still alive, who are there now, today, the sort of statements they make.
When I see on the TV the situation of the Arab refugees, and I think we shouldn't help them, we should create a problem, a humanitarian problem that will force Egypt and Turkey and Europe to absorb as refugees as they absorbed from Syria. The next stage is establishing Jewish communities in Gaza itself, in the city of Gaza, and in Gush Katif, and Elei Sinai, Nisanit, Dugit, Far Darom, Morag, Netzarim, and Shirat Hayam, Kfar Hayam, all the beautiful places that I saw with my own eyes. We want to return there, to accuse people like me who saw Samaria, that was called the Black Hills of Samaria, and now with 500,000 Jews, with 250 communities, to say to me that what I do, what I say is not realistic. I think that what we did is the symbol, is the best example of what realistic thought and deeds are. We'll do the same in Gaza. We do not depend on the United States. More than we depend on the United States, the United States depends on us. Don't think that we will stop the war in Gaza before we put a total end to Hamas, to the supporters of Hamas, and resettling the entire area of Gaza by Jews.
I find some of these frightening, and I think we should all begin to question and to look at them. And perhaps it brought to mind, to my mind at least, a particular stanza from a great epic poem, A Mask of Anarchy, written by Percy Bysshe Shelley in 1820, after the massacre of men, women, and children at Peterloo in Manchester when ordinary citizens were protesting for their rights. And that stanza goes, "Arise like lions after slumber, in unvanquishable number. Shake to earth your chains like dew, which in sleep have fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few." And we should perhaps think about that.